Chicago Bears fans and analysts seem to be putting too much emphasis on the defensive tackle position. I'll explain why, that, and a little bit more on this episode of the House Huddle Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the House Huddle Podcast. Here are your hosts.
The middle at the 15 to the 20, breaks free of the 25 to the 30, to the outside, 40, midfield, 40, 30 to the coast, 20, 15, Hester 5, touchdown Bears!
What's up, Palace Huddlers?
Huddle up. All right, that was pretty good.
Yeah. Free agency is right around the corner. I mean, there's been a bunch of moves going on today. We are not here to talk about that because
We'll say, though, there's been a bunch of moves today, but isn't it weird that, like, tomorrow all this news is going to break, but we know it's already been agreed upon today, right? Like, there's no way that it's actually, like, legal tampering, nothing being tampered with. So it's just, good for everybody to actually keep it to themselves until tomorrow.
Yeah, well, free agency actually doesn't start till Tuesday, Tuesday, right? No.
Free agency, I think it's Wednesday. I think it's a 2-day legal
yes, you get the 2-day, 2-day tampering, Monday, Tuesday. Sorry, I'm losing track of my days. A lot of the stuff that happened today was like trades, which obviously can't become official, right?
Right.
And then like extensions. Now those are official. But yeah, like DK Metcalf went to Pittsburgh, so they get two dominant wide receivers over there with the House Huddle favorite George Pickens.
We're calling George Pickens dominant, huh? Okay, all right.
Hey, we got to keep up with that George Pickens trend this season.
Fair enough. There's another Pickens who might pop up in this episode.
Maybe a little bit. Yeah. So the focus of this episode is going to be about the defensive tackle position. But yeah, there's been a lot of moves. We are not here to really talk too much about that. We will have more free agency content coming up later this week. But something I wanted to get out and ahead of before free agency actually started for the Chicago Bears and the rest of the NFL is the defensive tackle position. We have done some episodes specifically with mock drafts that consistently have comments in the comment section about, you didn't take a defensive tackle? Oh, I would have went defensive tackle there. How could you not have taken a defensive tackle there? And a lot of the times it was in reference to our first, second, or third pick.
Mm-hmm.
And
all these premium picks.
Yeah, and I have to do a little bit of a pushback on that. I have an article coming out tomorrow. Well, maybe tomorrow. I got to see when it's actually going. But sometime this week that will be focusing on this particular issue. And it all centers around Dennis Allen. And I think too much of the situation that's going on right now is that we have now seen Matt Eberflus covet that 3 technique, right? Like that 3 technique was so important to his defense. He has talked about it over and over and over again, and they wanted to build that line from the inside out. It was never really about the defensive end position until Ryan Poles brought in Montez Sweat. But if you look back at a lot of the defensive lines that he had in Indianapolis, there wasn't like a dominant defensive end consistently. It's a little bit of the opposite with the Dennis Allen situation. So we're going to look at that really quick. Before I put this slide up there, please continue to support the show. Hit the like button. I'd love to hear comments. I feel like I'm going to get a lot of pushback on this one. So a lot of comments in the comment section.
Let him have it. He can handle himself. Let him have it, though.
Yep. Fire him off at me. And if I didn't say it already, hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed yet. So yeah, again, we love all of the support. Let's get into it. All right. Actually, before I put the slide up, I'm gonna say these names. I don't want you to be able to read them.
Okay.
Until I throw it up there.
All right.
So I'm just gonna read you some names, and you tell me who stands out to you from the defensive tackles that were on Dennis Allen's teams in New Orleans, Denver, Oakland. Okay. Bunkley Broderick,
Okay.
Kevin Vickerson.
Is this a Key and Peele sketch?
It is not.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to get Tommy Kelly.
Okay.
I'm going to give you one here. I think you'll know Richard Seymour.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, so we're going to Oakland then. Okay.
We're now in Oakland. Yep.
Yeah.
Vance Walker, Pat Sims, Antonio Smith, Nick Fairley, Tyler Davison, Malcolm Brown, David Oniyama. Oh gosh, I need Justin. Onyemata. David
Okay.
Onyemata. I can never speak.
I think I actually do know that one. I think he was a early round pick, if I'm recalling correct.
Yeah, I believe you are correct, but didn't actually.
Right. It didn't really amount to too much. But again, that's what we're talking about. Dan Allison's defense.
Yep. Nathan Shepard, Kalen Saunders, and Shai Tuttle.
So I know Kalen Saunders. He was a Western Illinois kid who shot up draft boards. I think he got drafted like the 3rd or 4th round or something like that.
I think off the top of my head, he was a 4th round pick.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so those were Dennis Allen's defensive tackles. I'll put that up here now.
It's an impressive group.
Why is it not? Let's get rid of that. Come on.
There we go.
No, why is it being weird?
I wish I could help you with the producing part. Bear with us, folks. We're gonna
there we go. What is going on?
Nailed it.
All right. So those are the names. Now, there are 2 names on here that I have not listed yet, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Okay. So for anyone who's out there ready to jump down my throat, what about what? Okay, 2 more guys are coming. I wanted to emphasize.
So what was the cut to make it on this list? Like
this was literally everyone but the other 2 names that I have not named. Literally everyone that he has ever coached. Now, I will point out Bunkley Broderick and Kevin Vickerson. He inherited those 2 people when he became the defensive coordinator in Denver. The very next year, that was 2011. The very next year, 2012, he goes on to Oakland as their head coach. He inherited Richard Seymour. He did not bring him in. Richard Seymour was already there. Richard Seymour, it was actually his last year to ever play football. He only played in 8 games and had a mediocre season. And for him anyway. Yeah.
I think Nick Fairley was a free agent signing, right? Didn't he start in Detroit?
Which one? I'm sorry.
Nick Fairley.
Nick Fairley. Yes, I believe he was a free agent signing.
Okay.
But here's what I want to point out. There's 2 names on here, only 2 names that ever made a Pro Bowl.
Okay.
Richard Seymour being one of them.
Okay, but
the other one,
Oakland.
What was that?
Not with Oakland, though, right?
Not with Oakland, or at least not with Dennis Allen.
Okay.
Most of that came with the Patriots. The other one is Antonio Smith, and Antonio Smith did that with Houston, and he actually did it as a defensive end and not as a defensive tackle.
Okay.
But that was the only other person to ever make a Pro Bowl, which obviously negates the fact that none of these guys have even sniffed an all-pro voting, right? None of them have been all-pros, again, outside of Richard Seymour. Okay? That's the list, and I want people to look at this. Like, these are the people that Dennis Allen has had in his system in every stop that he's ever made where he's making personnel decisions as a defensive coordinator or a head coach.
And the backdrop of this is that Dennis Allen has had successful defenses. We're not saying he hasn't.
So that's the thing, right?
Because he hasn't had the right defensive line. He's run successful defenses with these guys in the middle of it.
Correct. So even in fact, like Denver with Kevin Vickerson and Bunkley Broderick, they had 41 sacks that year. I think they were, if I recall off the top of my head, they were tied for 10th in the NFL with 41 sacks that year.
Okay.
Why? We'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's get to the 2 guys that I didn't name. And this is where people might throw some shade at me. Okay. And I'm putting it out there because I don't want to hide things. These are the outliers. There are 2 people in his tenure that were drafted in the first round. Okay. Sheldon Rankins, great defensive tackle. first-round draft pick. He went 12th overall, drafted in 2016. He played 5 years with New Orleans. Not 5 years total. This is 5 years under Dennis Allen. So they did give him his fifth-year option. He did not stay. He went to the Jets after this. Had I think 4 years left in the league. Had 17 and a half sacks over those 5 years. However, 8 of them came in 2018. No All-Pro votes, no Pro Bowls. Now, more recently, Brian Bresee, who I was actually very high on.
I remember you liked him.
I think if I recall, he was my second favorite defensive tackle in that draft class. A lot of people were down on him because of the foot injury, if I recall, but he seems to be doing well. He did not start at all in his first season with New Orleans, but did end up with 4.5 sacks. He was drafted almost in the second round, 29th pick, so he did fall a lot that year. But he's got 12 total sacks over those 2 years. He just had a 7.5 sack season and didn't start the year as the starting defensive tackle, but did eventually become the defensive tackle or starting defensive tackle with 11 starts. Okay. As of now, I mean, this is obviously very early in his career. 0 All-Pro votes, 0 Pro Bowls.
Right. Now, this 2023 draft class also had a couple other defensive tackles in it that I'm sure will come up in this episode, right?
They actually will not. I did not talk about the draft class at all specifically.
Okay.
But yes, it was a pretty hot and heavy.
Well, this was the Jalen Carter draft, right?
It was Jalen Carter. It was,
Carter, and then
Jervon Dexter.
The point is, Jervon Dexter, right? So, I mean,
Yancey, right? Out of now down in Tampa Bay.
Right.
Yeah, so there was a Kalijah Yancey. I couldn't think of his first name. I knew it was an interesting one. Kalijah Yancey. It was a very good defensive tackle draft class.
Right.
It just, again, I think it was the injury that really kind of pushed Bresee down. And if I recall, he didn't have that great of a combine.
Right. But I mean, I think I don't know, I'm not exactly sure where you're going because we're trying to do this off the cuff. But I mean,
it's all reactionary for Bob. He has no idea.
He's invested in the defensive tackles twice with some pretty good players. The argument could be that this player is already on the roster for him in Jervon Dexter.
So that is the one name that will be talked about a little bit, but you're definitely hinting at it already. Is
right.
If you look at where Brian Bresee was even just last year compared to Jervon Dexter, who had 6.5 sacks last year, it's not that. I mean, you're not talking a vast difference here. And if I were to compare where people had Bresee and Jervon Dexter going into 2023, especially after like the injury and how much he fell, I'm going to bet that a lot of people had him pretty close.
Sure.
And I don't really see the need for getting a stud defensive tackle. I keep seeing all these names like, look, go get Kenneth Grant. Take Kenneth Grant at 10 or Walter Nolan at 10. And these are two names that you're constantly hearing and seeing amongst not only just Bears social media, but also like analysts that are out there too that cover the Chicago Bears. And look, I love both of those players. They're my DT2 and my DT3. Mason Graham, I doubt will drop to 10. He might be the one guy, and we'll talk draft in a little bit.
At that point, that's Mason Graham being at 10. You're talking about drafting best player available because he'll be the best player available at 10 if he's there. So you take him. Really, the fact that he's a defensive tackle is great, but it's not necessarily you're drafting because you need a defensive tackle. It's just best player available.
Correct. Now, why is it that I've been pushing defensive ends? Why did I push defensive end in our mock draft where we took 2 in our mock draft, right? Plus we signed Khalil Mack in our mock offseason free agency period.
And here's why. Austin Booker too. Yeah.
Here's why. I didn't even list all of the defensive ends. I only listed the top defensive ends that have played for him. Von Miller, Elvis Dumervil, which those two guys he did inherit in Denver, but had monster seasons, monster season that year. Both of them were the reason why they had those 41 sacks. Von Miller had 11.5, and I don't recall off the top of my head, but I think Dumervil had, 9. Okay, so
with Dennis Allen, was he the defensive coordinator when Denver won the Super Bowl? Is that?
Oh, you know what? I did not check that if it was the year. It was 2011.
Okay. Oh no, they won the Super Bowl after 2011.
Well, it was 2016, right? When they won?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 2016
Okay.
with Peyton Manning. Oh no,
Yeah.
2011. You know what year that was? You know what this was? Because this was the year I was like, wait, they made the playoffs. They only went 8-8 that year. Maybe that'll tell you which year it was. They went 8-8.
Was it the Tim Tebow year?
Yes, and the Chicago Bears were a part of that year because they beat the Bears, which got them a victory.
The Marion
at the end of the
Barber
year.
running out of bounds game.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay. But the point being here, okay, Cameron Jordan obviously has been in New Orleans like his whole entire life, right? Khalil Mack was a guy that was drafted the final year that Dennis Allen was in Oakland. So the stuff that happened after he was gone obviously doesn't pertain to Dennis Allen's system. I'm going to say this too, like the combined Pro Bowls, first team All-Pros, second team All-Pros, like not all of that fell under Dennis Allen, but these are guys that he targeted, guys that he wanted. Trey Hendrickson was drafted by New Orleans. All guys that like he was involved with I'm assuming, right? But they fit his system. We keep talking about the bigger ends, guys who can get after the quarterback, but also can stop the run. Trey Hendrickson, not as much. But
yeah.
34 combined Pro Bowls. All those defensive tackles. I didn't just look at Dennis Allen's years. I looked at their whole careers, right? Except for Richard Seymour. But I looked at their whole careers. None of those guys, right? I didn't count their stuff, but none of those guys, except for Richard Seymour and the one time for Antonio Smith.
Right.
That was it. 34 combined Pro Bowls out of 5 defensive ends. 10 first-team All-Pros out of 5 defensive end. 8 second-team All-Pros out of 5 defensive end. I didn't even put in here 2 of these guys won Defensive Player of the Year.
Right.
Okay. Like, defensive ends matter more in Dennis Allen's system.
So, I'll throw that in there. They matter more, and the Bears are losing way more snaps from last year who played defensive end than they are losing defensive tackles. So, if you're talking about need, defensive ends are the need then.
Yeah. I mean, you got rid of DeMarcus Walker already, which I was a little surprised with.
And DeMarcus Walker, believe it or not, played the most snaps on the defensive line in total last year, but even obviously the defensive end. Marcus Walker played 120 more snaps than Montez Sweat last year. So that's what we got to replace. That's why you took 2 defensive ends in the draft.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, defensive ends, like, look, I wouldn't mind doubling up in this draft. I really wouldn't. I mean, it just depends on what happens over the next couple of days, obviously.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in free agency or, trade or whatever. But, yeah, I mean, you're convincing me very, very more that, in terms of you're talking about need, top-level defensive ends is a much better need than a top-level defensive tackle. Now, that's not to say there still isn't some room for some rotational defensive tackles, of course.
But this is where, like, our free agency stuff came in with, like, Jerry Tillery, right? Like, I would love to see Jerry Tillery here. I was high on Jervon Kinlaw. Like, I would love to see Kinlaw in this defense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd be completely satisfied if you go out and upgrade Zach Pickens. That's the Pickens. I wanted to make sure we said his name.
That's Pickens. Exactly.
Zach Pickens does not deserve to be the DT3 on this team, right? And Jervon Walker probably would have been had he not been released. I think he's a rotational guy who plays both inside outside. And Dennis Allen.
Sorry, you threw me off there. You're talking about DeMarcus Walker? Yeah.
What did I say?
I think you said Jervon Walker.
Sorry.
Threw me off. Oh, that's all right. That's all right.
Yeah. DeMarcus Walker.
Yeah. So, I mean, another way to tackle it, too, is, I guess no pun intended, some interesting athletes, right, later in the draft as well. It doesn't just have to be second wave free agents, but there's going to be guys to target, day 2, day 3, right?
Yes, and that's where we're going to get into right now. And I'm not going to get into like the depths of this in this episode because we're already at 19 minutes. I was trying to keep it between 20 and 25. Just some names. I mean, look, day 2 defensive tackle targets. I will say like Derek Harmon, like, is a guy I have a late first, early second round grade on. He'll probably go in the first round and probably won't be there. So I probably shouldn't have used his photo, to be honest. because he probably will go in the first round. That said, I think if he fell, like go grab him at 39, right? Like when we're talking best player available, like take him at 39. I'd be completely fine with it. It's just not needed is the whole point, right? So it opens up the fact that they have more flexibility in the draft than I think people think. And I don't think we need to pigeonhole them into taking some of these early round defensive tackles. So, we've talked about a lot of these guys already in other episodes, but anyone there in the second round, I'd be completely fine with the Bears taking. They're all upgrades over what they currently have behind Gervon Dexter and Andrew Billings. Because that's the other part too, is Andrew Billings is also a very good defensive tackle. So your two starting defensive tackles are already better than 90% of the names on here. And that's 100%. Including the two outliers.
Right.
So I'm getting frustrated with the you got to get a defensive tackle comments. And again, keep coming at me in the comment section because I love to argue.
At this point, listen this far. Have you been convinced, or are you still like, no, it's Walter Nolan or bust with number 10?
Yeah. And that's what's frustrating too, is I don't hear enough people talking about this. Like I don't see the Athletic talking about the defensive tackle position and the fact that how Dennis Allen has looked at this. I don't see the CHGO guys talking about this. And I will say, like, I don't listen to their podcast as much as I used to, mostly because I'm putting out our own content and I try not to let that influence my perspectives. But also just because I've been super busy. It's funny because I'm going to throw this out there and my wife doesn't listen, so it doesn't matter. But like, I was texting Bob and Justin yesterday and Justin's like, he thought something big happened with the Chicago Bears because there was like 10 texts back and forth between Bob and I, and it was literally just DIY content because I was trying to figure out how to restain certain things on my stairs. And now my wife is having us rip those out and we're putting iron rod balusters instead. So big projects going on over here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't have very many guys graded out for the third round. Jordan Phillips, Darius Alexander. I know last week or our last episode, when we did the 3-round mock, I threw in CJ West. I have a 4th round grade on him. The Bears don't have a 4th round pick. I was looking at these prior to this episode. I have a 4th round pick on or 4th round grade on him. I don't think that they're going to be able to. I personally don't think he's going to be there in the 5th. If he's there in the 5th, to me, that's a guy you got to slam the hammer for. But yeah, he's more of a 4th round pick for me, along with Jordan Farmer. And then there's a couple other names there in the 5th round, but and that's as far as I've gotten personally with the defensive tackle class are these guys. Anyone else that you guys in the comment section want to throw out there, I'd gladly go review some more tape if you want me to look at adding them to my list and slotting them into certain spots. But this is where I'm at the position. I've moved on to other positions, and I don't want to, spend too much time on the later round guys because most of them are dart throws anyway. Right. But the point being, again, there are guys who you can get that can fill the void, at least with rotational snaps. I don't think they're going to rotate quite as much as we saw with Matt Eberflus. Montez Sweat, I think probably was for example, when he first got here, I recall how frustrating it was to see Sweat not on the field in key position, key
critical third downs in the 4th quarter. It's like, what are we doing? We just paid this guy $100 million. Right. Just to keep your rotation going. I don't understand it. That's just not my philosophy. If you want to win, you got to have your best guys on the field majority of the time. Yeah.
Perfect example is go look at Gervon Dexter's snaps compared to Jalen Carter's snaps. And from an efficiency standpoint on the stat sheet, Gervon Dexter actually performed better. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything because, as we all know, defensive tackles don't always show up on the stat sheet. They're doing a lot of things that just kind of disrupt the game and let others take the credit for it.
Right. Right. But I mean, to that point, that if the alpha defensive tackle for Dennis Allen is already on this team, is basically what we're saying here. Like
Yeah.
it's fine. All that list of nobodies that Dennis Allen has coached to very successful results in his defenses. Like, we already have Dexter and Billings, and Pickens, were picking on Pickens, but like he's probably not going anywhere. That's still a 3rd round pick from 2 years ago. You don't give up on those guys. So you either add an interesting second wave veteran in like a guy like Tillery, who we did, or you take a swing at a guy in the 5th round and see if he's going to add to your depth. But I mean, it certainly looks like it's not critical to grab an early down defensive tackle and call defensive tackle need to get the results that we want. It looks like defensive end is where we got to invest.
And it's honestly why I'm surprised to hear that. I don't really know if I should be giving this information out, that they're interested in Michael Williams, right? The defensive tackle from
Milton Williams.
Milton Williams. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Michael Williams is the defensive end that I like out of
who we loved it. And 10 might be a little bit of a stretch, but a trade down and end up with Michael Williams. But
yeah, so Milton Williams, I'm a little surprised that I'm hearing from our guy Gary Rappaport that they're interested in him, just because the amount of money that he's going to likely generate in this free agency wave.
That might have been before bringing on the Jackson and Tooney contract.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you didn't know where you were going to be financially at that point. I haven't heard that I haven't heard this recently. This was prior to those trades, or at least the Joe Tooney trade. It's just, again, interesting to me that they would think about that position being that much of a need based off of this information, right? Like, it just doesn't mesh with me as far as that goes. I think adding a defensive end opposite of Montez Sweat should be your higher priority.
I'd rather invest in another defensive end, another one in the draft, and you got Booker, and now you're running with fire here.
Yeah. But that's all I got. I'm glad you came in.
I didn't know what to expect coming in here. I'm like, we need those, but it's jarring when you see that list and knowing that Dennis Allen runs successful defenses. So yeah, we're good. Defensive tackle, we're good. Depth rotation, sure. Need at the top of the draft? Nope. I'm convinced.
No. But to your point, Bob, best player available.
Yeah,
that's yours in my mentality, I think, with the draft almost every year.
Yeah, Harmon falls to the second. He's best player. Great,
outside of George Pickens.
Outside of George Pickens. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Well, and again, now I'm putting safety higher than defensive tackle because, and I think I had defensive tackle the highest. I think safety was my last, right? Like,
you were the only one. You didn't have defensive tackle in your top 5, if I'm remembering correctly. You had safety in your top 5.
Oh, you're right. I didn't. I had the 3 interior lineman, defensive
end. We all had
end
and 3. Yep, exactly.
That's right. So, well, I'm going to put running back ahead of defensive tackle.
Yeah, that's one comment I wanted to try to make when we got in here, but it didn't really flow. Like, at this point, I'm willing to say that running back is a bigger need than defensive tackle as well. And that varies from where we started the offseason, when I said defensive tackle was a top 5 need for sure. A real running back to pair with Swift is a bigger need.
Yeah. Well, let's see what happens over the next couple of days.
Yeah,
there's running backs who are no longer available for free agency. I saw Aaron Jones is going back to Minnesota. So that'll be interesting. I think it was an overpay personally, but we'll see how that goes. There's some quarterback shakeups going on.
Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff. So stay tuned as we dissect all this later this week.
Yeah, but until then, go get Drew Dahlman. Bear down.
That's right.
And claws up.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Hopefully we're back with some good news.